Hello and welcome to My PGCE, a podcast documenting my journey as a trainee teacher, with a special focus on mental health. I am your host, James B. Another week of the PGCE done. Well, I say done, but I in fact did very little this week. But another week has passed, nonetheless, so here I am with another episode, which will follow the usual format. First, an overview of the week, then I'll zoom in on a couple of things, and then I will talk about my mental health. This week has been significant for two reasons. First, it was the week of my 30th birthday. Second, it was the week I got COVID. So, last Saturday, after finishing recording the last episode, I spent much of the afternoon doing various jobs in order to keep the evening available, though at the time I didn't know what for. It turned out that my partner had organised for me a surprise birthday party, which was very lovely indeed, and also quite surreal, having people from completely separate periods of your life all together in the same space is interesting, maybe even a bit unnerving. Like, I was thinking, okay, I don't want my current boss who's sat over there talking to those lads I was an undergraduate with over there, for instance. But anyway, it was a really lovely evening. And I enjoyed it. Because had you asked me beforehand, I would have said that never in a million years would I have enjoyed a surprise birthday party. Yet I did. So, thank you to my partner for that. Now, last weekend was also Arrivals weekend, which I did mention in the last episode. So I'm a resident tutor. I live in halls of residence with students as part of the university's welfare system. And last weekend was when all the new students were arriving. It's the biggest weekend of the year for the residential life team. One of the things we must do as resident tutors over Arrivals weekend is conduct the kitchen meetings for our new students, where we basically give them all the essential information they'll need in order to live happily and healthily in university accommodation. For me, these meetings were scheduled to take place on Sunday and Monday evening. Yet on Sunday afternoon, I started to feel particularly unwell, took a lateral flow test, and 2 little lines appeared, which suggested that I had coronavirus. So I immediately went into self-isolation and tried my best to move the kitchen meetings from in-person to online via Teams, which was successful to some extent. Anyway, the next morning, Monday morning, I went for a PCR test to confirm the lateral flow result, which is recommended, and then went back to my flat to continue my self-isolation, which wasn't what I really wanted to do because I was meant to be at university attending a subject studies session, the topic of which was planning and behaviour management. Sorry, classroom management. We don't manage behaviour, we manage the classroom. Manage the classroom and the behaviour will follow. Anyway, I couldn't attend the session in person, obviously, so I tried to work my way through the PowerPoint at home instead. Now, this PowerPoint was a hefty 131 slides long, many of which were packed with dense information. And that would be enough to intimidate me at the best of times. But on Monday I was feeling pretty ill. I'd say that Monday was probably the height of my symptoms. So I wasn't firing on all cylinders and really struggled to absorb the information in this PowerPoint. So I emailed my subject tutor the person who was delivering the session. I explained this to her and asked if she could just direct me to one or two resources that I could check out instead. And she responded and did exactly that. She directed me to Rosenshine's Teaching Principles, which I had come across already, Mark McCourt's Teaching for Mastery, and Doug Lemov's Teach Like a Champion. But she also very kindly offered to meet with me via Teams and talk me through the PowerPoint presentation. And we arranged to do that the following evening, Tuesday evening. Tuesday daytime, I was still awaiting the result of my PCR test, but by this time I was pretty certain that I had COVID. I had found out that the chances of a false positive lateral flow test are 1 in 1,000, and all of my symptoms were screaming coronavirus. I had a fever on and off, although at that stage it was starting to wane. I had a new and persistent cough, and I had completely lost my sense of smell. And I'm yet to regain it. It's really quite bizarre, actually. It's like living in black and white in a way. Anyway, I spent much of Tuesday writing up a university assignment, which was a 1,000-word essay comparing two learning theories. I think I mentioned this last episode, but I chose Bruner's discovery learning theory and Sweller's cognitive load theory. I chose those two because cognitive load theory seems to oppose discovery learning theory to some extent. So I wrote that up on Tuesday and then had my Teams meeting with my subject tutor on Tuesday evening. Now, I thought this meeting might just be a 10-minute run-through of the important PowerPoint slides. But in fact, my subject tutor spent a whole hour of her evening talking me through the whole PowerPoint presentation in great detail. And by Tuesday evening, I was feeling just a tad better and in a better place to actually absorb some of this information. And so I am extremely grateful for her time. She really made me feel valued as a student, which is always a great way to feel, especially on the day of your 30th birthday. Now, for much of the rest of the week, I have been getting started with my next university assignment, which is a 3,000-word essay on an issue related to the teaching of my specialist subject, so mathematics. And I have chosen the issue of maths anxiety. So as you know, I have a very keen interest in mental health, and so maths anxiety seemed like the obvious choice. So for much of the week since Wednesday, I've been doing some research on maths anxiety. And on Wednesday, I also got my PCR test result back, which confirmed that I do indeed have COVID. Although by that time, like I said, I was pretty certain. And so I must remain in self-isolation for the full 11 days, which will take me up to the 7th of October. There's one other thing that's worth mentioning. So in addition to researching maths anxiety, on Thursday morning I had a brief 10-minute meeting via Teams with my professional mentor. So whenever I mention a tutor, that's someone from the university side of things, the academic side of things. Whenever I mention a mentor, it's someone from the school side of things. So that's the teaching practice side of things. And on Thursday morning, I had a quick catch up with my professional mentor. She just wanted to see how I was getting on. But the main takeaway from that meeting was that we've decided that the week following my return to school, so this will be the week starting 11th of October, I'm going to start doing some teaching, which is great. I will start doing at least some starter exercises with the Year 7 higher class that I'm currently observing. So that's exciting. Something to look forward to, and preparing for which can help keep me occupied during this period of self-isolation. To wrap up the catching COVID subplot of this week, the timeline suggests that I probably caught it on Friday, which would make sense because that Friday I was at university. That was the day that I had the mindfulness for teaching session, which I raved about last week. But it makes sense that COVID could be caught at one of these university days because you have all of these trainee teachers who, for the majority of the week, have spent their time in school surrounded by hundreds of children. And then, for one day a week, they all come together in the same space at university. And social distancing is maintained to some extent, but only to some extent. There are still lapses here and there. That said, no one else from that university day became ill. But as we know, you can have COVID and be asymptomatic. So my advice would be that if you're on a PGCE course like mine, where you spend much of your time in school, but one day a week at university, then be especially careful on that university day to wear your mask, socially distance, sanitize, etc. And also get double jabbed, because I'm double jabbed, and if what I experienced was only mild symptoms, which is meant to be the case if you're vaccinated, then I hate to imagine what strong symptoms would be like that have probably landed me in hospital. And I should also say that no one else from my surprise birthday party on the Saturday evening has since come down with COVID, which is quite the relief. So that's the overview of a week I'll remember, but probably for the wrong reasons. Now I will zoom in on a couple of things. Usually I try to zoom in on at least one thing from my teaching practice in the classroom, and at least one thing from my studies at university. But I've had no classroom time this week, so we'll have to make do with just the latter. The first thing I'd like to zoom in on is something I discussed with my subject tutor on Tuesday evening when she was kindly helping me catch up with the work I'd missed on Monday. It is how versus why. In particular, which one do you teach first? My tutor said that most everyone in the class on Monday thought that you should teach the why before the how, because you must first know why you're doing something in order to be motivated to do it. Once you're motivated, then you can start learning how. I disagree, and I'll explain why. The first thing to ask is, which why? Because there's more than one. It could be a why concerning a particular mathematical operation, so why do we do it in this way? I guess you could call that a methodological why. Or it could be, why are we doing this at all? You could call that a motivational why. You may even get exasperated students saying, "Why am I here? What does it all mean?" You could call that an existential why. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make is there are different whys. And it's not always clear which why it is we're talking about. But whichever why it may be, I don't think it's possible to understand the why until we understand the how. Suppose that someone has never before brushed their teeth. Not only that, they also have no concept of teeth or brushing. When it comes to teeth brushing, this person is completely in the dark. Yet I come along and attempt to explain to them why they should be brushing their teeth. They may nod along blankly, but in truth, they haven't a clue what I'm talking about. They understand that I'm trying to give a justification for something, but they don't know what that thing is. The best I can hope for in this situation is that they commit my words to memory by brute force. In fact, it's not even my words, because many of the words I'll use, they won't understand. So what I'm asking them to commit to memory is simply the sounds that I've been making with my mouth. And this will take an enormous effort. But at this stage, that's all they can hope to do. Commit the noises I've made with my mouth to their memory and hope that soon enough something will come along which will make them make sense, which will give them meaning. And what is it they're waiting for? Well, it's the experience of brushing their teeth. They need to have a go. But they shouldn't be left to their own devices, because they could develop all sorts of misconceptions about how to brush their teeth, especially if all the while they're trying to hold in their heads my completely abstract explanation as to why they should be brushing their teeth. So instead of being left to their own devices, they need to be shown how. They need to be shown how to brush their teeth so that they can understand what brushing their teeth is. And then only then will my explanation about why they should brush their teeth, only then will that make sense, because they'll know what I'm talking about. So you can see with this example how trying to explain why first can in fact disrupt the learning process. And I think this happens all too often in maths education. Take factorising quadratics, for example. You've got a student who never before has attempted to factorise a quadratic. Yet I'm there as a teacher trying to explain to them why quadratics should be factorised. They're not going to know what I'm talking about. But they want to know what I'm talking about, so bless them, they try to keep my completely abstract explanation in their heads, which takes up precious working memory. So much, in fact, that when they come to have a go at factorising quadratics with my instruction, so when I start to show them how to do it, there's little room left in their heads. This is why I think that the why should always follow the how. You should show students how first, even if only briefly, just to ensure that they know what it is you're talking about. Then you can explain why. To put it another way, before moving on, a conversation about why you should do something is a higher order conversation. In order to understand it, you must first have the relevant concepts. And where do you get those concepts? Well, you get them from experience, relevant experience. And you'll acquire those concepts from experience in a much more efficient way if you're shown how. Therefore, how should come before why. That's my opinion anyway. The next thing I want to zoom in on is something I read whilst researching maths anxiety, and it kinda blew my mind. It's in a paper called Mathematics Anxiety and Working Memory, Longitudinal Associations with Mathematical Performance in Chinese Children by Bobby Ho Hong Ching, and that was published in Contemporary Educational Psychology in 2017. Anyway, this study found that mathematics anxiety has a more pronounced impact on mathematical problems that require more processing resources. And that makes perfect sense, right? So the problems that require more processing resources are typically the harder problems. So if you have maths anxiety, you're going to struggle more with harder maths problems. That makes perfect sense. You would think, therefore, that children with more processing power would be more resilient to this particular effect. But they aren't. And this is what blew my mind. Children with greater working memories are in fact more vulnerable. What? My reaction exactly. Now, there are competing explanations for this, but here's one from Ramirez et al., 2013-2016. So I'm going to paraphrase here. People with higher working memories, so those people with more processing power, you could say, they tend to rely on more complicated problem-solving strategies. And these strategies put a greater burden on their working memory, which is normally fine because, as we said at the start, they've got high working memory. But when their working memory is being crowded out by maths anxiety, they no longer have the processing power to rely on these more complicated problem-solving strategies. And so their performance suffers more than if they'd had a lower working memory capacity and had therefore relied on less complicated problem-solving strategies. Anyway, I thought that was fascinating. And I guess it's an argument for always teaching the most efficient problem-solving strategy and to outsource as much of your working out, to paper. Get it out of your working memory onto the page in front of you and use the most efficient, simple, if you will, problem-solving strategy. Therefore, if you do suffer with maths anxiety, you'll be less likely to underperform on those trickier questions. So that's the most interesting thing I've come across so far in my research on maths anxiety. But there'll no doubt be other things, and I'll keep you updated as I go along. That's it for zooming in this week. Now, it's mental health time. I think I should get a separate jingle for the mental health segment. If you have any ideas, please let me know. Despite being ill with COVID, my mental health this week has in fact been pretty good. In fact, when I first had my positive lateral flow test and had to go into self-isolation, I'd say that my general anxiety levels decreased because I no longer had any obligations. I didn't have to go into school. I didn't have to go into university. In fact, I had nothing to do whatsoever than to stay in my flat. But I know where that general strategy for dealing with anxiety can lead because it's led me there before. Obligations are a good thing. They're what keep in my experience, depression at bay. Sure, they contribute to anxiety, but if you try to reduce your anxiety by reducing all of your social obligations, soon you'll have nothing to do, and depression will pounce. So yes, when I first had to go into self-isolation, I'd say that my general anxiety level initially improved. But it's only a tentative improvement and one I'm wary of. I'd say my main concern has been losing my routine. So being able to function and perform on my PGCE, for me, all comes down to my routine. If my routine starts to falter, then so does my performance. And having to take 11 days out is certainly enough to scupper even the best of routines. So I have been going to bed later and getting up later, for instance. And my diet's all over the place. I've been having takeaway most evenings. Even my vegetarianism has gone out of the window. But starting today, I will do my best to start getting back into the old routines, the ones that help me function on my PGCE. So going to bed earlier, getting up earlier, eating properly. And even though I'm confined to my flat, I will try to start doing a bit of exercise. I think that will help. One thing that has made me sad in a general way, I wouldn't necessarily call this a mental health problem, is the fact that my partner, who has lived with me for a while now, is moving away to go to university. She's going up north. And because I got COVID, I haven't been able to see her and won't see her before she leaves. Not only that, I've been having to pack up her things for her from the flat and just leave them outside so that she can collect them. So that's been rather sad. But I know that next weekend I'll go to visit her, and I'm really looking forward to that. We have a plan where we're going to try to see each other every other week. I'll go up to her, and then 2 weeks later, she'll come down to me. With that in mind, I may have to put out a shorter episode every other week when I'm seeing my partner, or perhaps just do a longer episode on the in-between weeks. I'm yet to decide, but I'll figure it out as I go along. I'll go with the flow. I hope you've had a good week. I hope that you went with the flow, and I hope that your week to come is good also. And I look forward to talking to you again soon. If you like the episode, please spread the word in person and on social media. You can follow the podcast on Twitter @mypgcepod or email mypgcepod@gmail.com. Please subscribe, rate and review in your directory of choice. Please also consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/mypgcepod and helping fund both the podcast and my PGCE course. Thank you, and talk again soon.